welcome to the Meg Method podcast. And this is a very special episode. It is episode 100. I have the marathon master, David Yim, back, who has done all 6 major marathons. And we had such an incredible response from our London Marathon episode that we have had requests to do all 6. So I couldn't have anyone else but David Yim back to help me with that. I've only done the 4. Yimmy's done the whole 6. So we're going to rely on him for Berlin and for Tokyo and Boston. There we go. And we just want to give you a episode today all about Berlin, as that is the marathon coming up next. So welcome, David Yim.
Hey, good to see you again. And it's great to be on. I've got to say, it's less than a month to go to the Berlin Marathon. And I've got serious FOMO. I've got serious FOMO. I don't know whether it's because it's Berlin or because it's a major that I'm not running. I've run all the majors that have happened in the last 12 months up until now. And it's the first one I'm not going to be doing. They've got the whole autumn of majors. Of course, we've got Berlin, we've got Chicago and New York coming up. And I'm not running any of them. And I feel like I'm really missing out.
Yeah, you're like, what's happened? Well, that was so much part of your year. So if you are not in the know, Mr. David Yim, the legend that he is, did all 6 major marathons in less than 7 months, which I believe that makes you part of a very small group that's actually done that. Do you want to explain why, Yimmy?
So thanks, Meg. I think that I managed to do all 6 marathon majors. I did them all consecutively, and then I did London at the end of all of that as well. So I ran 7 marathons in 7 months. But the 6 came sort of back to back. And because London 22 was out of sequence, it was in October rather than in April that year, it meant that I could actually do all 6 majors back to back in the shortest time possible. So 6 months, 23 days. And I believe there are only 2 of us. That's what I believe. There are only 2 of us who have managed to do that. Absolutely. So a very, very select group. But then I decided that I would then go and do a victory lap around London 6 days after I did Boston. And I've got to say, that was so much. It was actually one of my favorite races that I've run. And it really was a victory lap after gaining my 6-star in Boston.
Absolutely incredible, mate. What a very exclusive club to be in. Only 2 people in the world have done it. And also all for charity as well, all for Young Lives versus Cancer. And, you have my utmost respect. That's both of our charities. Yeah. So good for you.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't run for any other charity. I can't imagine running for any other charity. And whilst I didn't get charity places with them to run those all those other marathons, I wore my Young Lives versus Cancer vests, and I used my 6-star journey as the story and the narrative for my fundraising. And, really, really happy to have raised £12,400.
Incredible.
From that, and knocking on towards over £35,000 that I've raised personally, which is just incredible amount. And I'm just so grateful to my sponsors and my supporters for keeping me honest and keeping me going and keeping me accountable.
Yeah, incredible, mate. And yeah, Young Lives versus Cancer are an incredible charity. Go check them out. It's all about helping people not only survive cancer with the resources they provide, but thrive afterwards. They're not actually a charity that provides support in terms of treatment, but it's everything around it. I think people often forget how derailing cancer can be, affecting people's lives, and they do everything around it to get them back on track and actually not only survive, but have that hopefully thrive post-cancer as well and get their life back on track. And also supporting all the families. So huge respect for you, Yimmy, going out of your way, as always, to do that. It is both our charities, so we can not mention that. But today, our main focus is all about the Berlin Marathon. The Meg Method podcast is all about helping people move, think, and feel better. And I know for both of us, running has been such a key resource in all of those areas. And Berlin is coming up very, very soon. It is on the 24th of September. And we hope that this podcast, just like with the London Marathon, is essentially the podcast, the resource that we wished we'd had before we'd done these races. It's going to have some personal anecdotes, as like we think that's always fun to hear other people's kind of experience of the race. Of course, we are very excited for you to have your own experience, and please do send us some messages afterwards to let us know how it went. But also just to give you some useful information. We know what those race day or leading up to jitters can be like, don't we, Yimmy?
Yeah, totally. Totally. The paranoia will be kicking in for anyone who's you're less than a month away now. I always say you're not allowed paranoia until 1 month before, and we're well inside that now. And if I was going to be running it in on the 24th of September, I know that I would be on that weather app every single day, checking the weather conditions.
Exactly. So we hope that this is a resource you can listen to, help with some of those paranoia nerves, and smile at hearing other people's experiences, and just get you actually, I find that nerves and excitement are the flip side of the same coin. So we hope this can turn some of those nerves into that pre-race excitement. So should we start off talking a little bit about the Expo, Yimmy?
Yeah, let's do that. Expo is one of the biggest expos that of any of the 6 major marathons. It takes place, as you know, at the Tempelhof, which is actually the second largest building by footprint in Europe.
Amazing. You'll feel it.
And you will. Yeah, it's vast. It's held in, I think, 4 halls. And you have to walk through all 4 halls to get to the end to actually pick up your bib. I think that's the first thing I would say. I would say if you're getting in on the Friday, and you have the opportunity to, always try and go on the Friday to pick up your bib first.
Yeah.
Because the Saturday is just so busy, even though it's such a vast space. There's 2 halls that have lots of merch and lots of stalls. And then there's the third hall, which was just Adidas, I think. The whole hall was Adidas. And then the last hall, tons of merch, which we can talk about. And then where you pick up your bib is right at the end of the last hall. And you basically get your bag, you get your bib, you get your timing chip, and you get any pre-ordered merchandise, which you will have the opportunity to select before you actually go to the expo. The only other thing I would say is when you go there, make sure you've got your ID with you. They're very, very strict about checking your ID and your start card, which they send to you. And at the entrance, if you're a runner, you will get your wristband, which, don't ask me why, I've still got last year's and the year before's strapped to my wrist. I'm hopelessly sentimental. So, but my thing with the wristband is it's actually really well done. That becomes your ticket to get into the athletes' village. So don't do, first piece of advice is do not cut this wristband off until you've finished the Berlin Marathon. Otherwise, you'll find you can't actually get into the start line village. But the expo is huge.
Yeah, so to sum that up, so it's at the Flughafen Tempelhof, which is actually one of the main sightseeing places in Berlin. So what's awesome, before the race has even started, you will have to go to the expo, so that ticks off a main sightseeing place. It's open from the Thursday to Saturday. So Thursday, the 21st, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. The Friday, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Saturday, 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. So 7 p.m., obviously 6:30 probably be your cutoff. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time, as there is crowds. You're not allowed any bags or suitcases bigger than hand luggage. So that's something to be aware of if you're going straight from the airport. But I believe you can store for around €2. But like Yimmy said, you do need your start card and you need an ID, which would be your driver's license or your passport. And your start card will be emailed with further info. And that's at the start of September. So that'll be coming out very soon if you haven't got that already. And it's plenty. As we do various podcasts on the different majors, we'll share our own experiences from Expo to the race. But certainly this Expo, lots of merchandise. So if you, I know Yimmy loves his merchandise. He likes to wear proudly all the stuff for the race. So this is something where, from our experience, I did it in 2018. You've done it a few times, Yimmy. What years had you done it?
I've done it twice. I did it in 2021 and 2022.
Perfect. Yeah. And all of our experiences, there's been more than enough merchandise. In fact, an entire hall dedicated to it.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I would say the thing that I would do is, so Adidas for the Berlin Marathon, they don't just have the finisher shirt. They also have an event shirt as well. So bear in mind, there are two shirts. Talk about milking the financial opportunity. I've actually got last year's finisher shirt here.
Beautiful.
I didn't like the design much. It was this horrible green color.
Yeah.
And I did notice that Adidas actually used exactly the same shade of green for the Boston 5K shakeout run finisher shirt as well. So
mine was bright yellow. You couldn't have missed me if you tried. Bright yellow, bright blue was my finisher shirt.
So I love that. So I think that you can pre-order your shirts before you go. And in fact, on the UK Adidas website, you can buy a lot of Berlin Marathon merch before you go. You can even buy the finisher shirt.
Yeah.
I actually saw somebody, and I know you and I have talked about this before, and we share this view with our friend David, another marathon runner. Never ever wear the finisher shirt until you've earned it, right?
Yes.
And I saw a few people wearing their finisher shirts on the Berlin Marathon course. I mean, really?
That's breaking race rules.
Yeah, that's
should be an official rule. Don't wear your finisher shirt until you're finished. Come on.
Exactly. So I would say just be aware that, both years that I've done the Berlin Marathon, the merch is such good quality. It's Adidas. There's a whole hall full of it, but it is quite a bit of a jumble sale in there.
Yeah.
That none of the stuff is put in size order, so you've just got to be patient and hunt through. Otherwise, pre-order the stuff. You can still go onto your participant dashboard and you can click on, purchase extras, just like you had to select. Well, there's no choice but to select the timing chip rental. You could have deselected it if you had your own professional timing chip, but you can pre-order t-shirts so that they're actually inside your bag when you get to the bit where you pick up your bib, and that saves you going through the Adidas hall on the way out, which it's like a tractor beam at the end of the day. You're going to get sucked in there anyway, but it saves you hunting around for sizes. I think there was some issue with medium-sized shirts not being available on the Friday night, but when I went back on the Saturday, they'd restock. So don't worry. And there are other places in town where you can actually pick up merch as well if they don't have your size at the expo.
Yeah, great advice. And something to be aware of once you have your bib, and again, double check this, but as far as I'm aware, from the 22nd to the 25th, once you have your bib, you can use that as part of public transport. But bear in mind, you would have to have your bib with you. You don't want to lose your bib, and definitely double check, as something we've observed is, as you can imagine, like they are very efficient in Germany, which is incredible. I think the public transport prices are reasonable, but if you do not follow the rules, if you don't have a validated ticket, then they will be very harsh with the fines, which fair enough if you're breaking the rules, but just don't let that trip you up, because it can go from very reasonable to very expensive if you don't validate your ticket or have your bib with you. So
I was there with my family only a couple of weeks ago in Berlin, and you buy the tickets from the machine. It's really easy. And I think actually the Berlin Marathon actually give you a transportation card as well. But the first time you use it, there's a machine, and literally you put it in there and it stamps a date stamp on it to say the first use. and it's valid from 72 hours after the first stamp. But if you don't have a validated travel card, if an inspector does catch you, and I have seen people pulled up, they particularly target touristy looking people who might not know all the rules. They are absolutely on it. And the fine, I think, is 120 euros, which you kind of don't want to end up paying. But you can get fined for that. So just watch out for that.
Yeah. So fantastic transport, really easy to get onto and around the city. That will be your main form of transport, I would bet, especially as there's no parking around the marathon. It's only accessible on foot when you get close to it as well. That the public transport will be your best friend, but as long as you're following the rules, and that is something to do a little research before you start the race, which I'm sure you would have done anyway. You'd be working out where the local transport is in relation to your hotel, etc. But yeah, just make sure that you are validating your ticket and that that is correct, that you can have your bib with you, and obviously keep your bib close to you. You do not want to lose that. And like Yimmy said, once you've got that wristband on, keep it on. So you want to make sure that actually it's a nicely fitted round your wrist, because if it's too tight, you're gonna be stuck. So that's with any race with wristbands, you'll realize that rookie mistake. So if we can save you there, make sure that it's not too tight, not too loose.
I've got to say that the Berlin does that better than anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about security checks and all this sort of stuff. It's so simple. It's a wristband. It stays on. It's made of like a nylon material. It's heat sealed onto your wrist, so you're not going to snap it. So that means that actually getting to security means they can check people really, really quickly, getting in and out. But actually, just thinking about this, the other thing that's just reminded me is the bib in Berlin. When you get to the expo, you can go to any desk in the bib hall to pick up your bib, because they live print the bibs there. And it's only one of 2 races now that still use the separate timing chip. I've got the Tokyo one here. And you do actually have to rent that timing chip. And I know you've got some information on when you need to actually give that back.
So the timing chip you give back at the end of the race. Usually, they'll catch you before you leave the finish area, but you need to have given that back by, I believe it's 5 p.m. So just make sure in your head before you leave, 5:30, sorry, you give that back. So make sure at the end of the race, if you haven't had someone take that off you, that you give that away. But usually it's as you leave the finish area, you give that back.
And I would say my top tip in relation to this timing chip is to take your wire ties, take some small wire ties with you.
Yeah.
Cable ties like you find on new electrical appliance cables. Just take a couple of those with you so you can tie them to your shoe. Don't do what I did last year, which is I didn't have them with me. I ended up having to put my laces through the timing chip. And I tell you what, after running a PB in Berlin last year and cramping up all the way down both legs, taking that timing chip off my shoe was a bigger challenge than running the last 4 miles of the Berlin Marathon. I tell you what, because I was literally on the struggle bus again, and helpfully some guy pulled my shoe off my foot. Of course, I had marathon brain and I couldn't work out that if I just took my shoe off, it'd be a lot easier. And there's me trying to bend down on one knee with my hamstring in absolute full cramp.
That's an example of marathon brain right there. Yeah.
Absolutely. You're not thinking straight. But take your cable ties with you so that it's actually easy to get the chip attached to your shoe and then take off afterwards. And the other thing I would point out is that the Berlin Marathon bib is the biggest bib of all of the majors.
Yeah.
It's 21 centimeters deep, and it's 25.5 centimeters across. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is because it's so wide and it sits on your vest, it's very easy to catch it with your arms as you're running. Yeah. It's exactly what I did in 2021. I caught it and ripped the top corner of it. and I use the event clips, and I wasted so much energy faffing around trying to reattach my bib, and I saw so many other runners who struggled with the same issue. And of course, I would always say, now I'm better prepared. Always take a spare safety pin with you, just pin to your vest, so that if you do end up breaking the vest and the safety pin, you've actually got a spare and you can reattach it. But it is wide. It's 25.5 centimeters wide.
Yeah, great advice. And none of this is to overwhelm you with information. It's just one of those things that until you've done it, you wouldn't even think about it. And I'm pretty sure, thinking back, actually, I didn't even think until you said 2018, same thing. Really easy to catch. And it's just, if we can save you some of that mental energy and some of that stress, just that little bit of advice to change things. And it's the perfect example of me and Yimmy have done exactly the same race. I've never had a problem with the cable ties. I've always been given them. Yimmy hasn't. So if we can just say, bring some extra, just so you don't get caught out, bring some extra safety pins, put that on your list now for packing. It's just going to save you any last minute mishaps that could cause you stress on the day. So
absolutely right. Other things worth noting at the expo, on the pre-order options, there's an option to get the pasta lunch.
Yes.
I would say that's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
The portion isn't massive, but it's convenient and it's tasty. And it was tasty last year. It was tasty the year before. And I was glad I got it, because once you're in the Tempelhof, you kind of don't want to walk too far away because it's just such a big place. So actually being able to eat lunch at the actual expo, that was really, really convenient. The one thing I wouldn't go for again, and I didn't last year, I did the year before. In my first year, I thought, just give me everything. And
I'm in.
I'm all in. I went for the pre-run massage, and I actually didn't think it was worth it. I know they're not supposed to work you hard. It's not like a proper sports massage or anything, because you don't want sore muscles, and go to race the next day. But it was almost like somebody just tickled me for 20 minutes, and I didn't find it particularly helpful.
You didn't enjoy your pre-race tickle?
I didn't enjoy my pre-race tickle. I mean, if it was meant to be a tickle and it was billed as a tickle, I'm sure I would have enjoyed it.
5 stars.
But it wasn't. It was billed as a massage, and I just don't think it was worth it. But there are the expo itself. I mean, it's so big. There's so many brands there. I think there was UFOs were there, if you like those sliders. Seiski were there. Garmin were there. Features were there. 2XU, Hoka, Ultra. And I'm just remembering these from the videos that I did around the expo hall. I'm really, really hoping that the experience will be the same for Berlin marathoners this year, because I know that in Boston, for example, Adidas launched a new watch, and therefore, because they were the main apparel sponsor, Garmin couldn't come to the expo. Because they launched their own sort of like versions of those calf sleeves. 2XU couldn't come to the expo. So I hope it's still inclusive of other brands. Certainly, I remember seeing Hoka and thinking like, wow, this is pretty good. And there are so many stalls selling things like nutrition, Cliff Bars, Cliff Blocks, gels, socks, all sorts of stuff. So there was a great range of merch if you like that sort of thing. Unfortunately, Meg, there was not a single free protein bar in sight, and I know you're a big fan of the protein bar.
I know. When we get on to the Chicago episode, I have a lot to say about that expo. They were above and beyond generous. But in terms of like actually being like things to see at the expo, Berlin do a great job. If you like your merchandise, there's plenty of it. There's lots of stalls, lots of different nutrition available. Like you said, lots of different brands, very inclusive with that.
Yeah.
The year I went, I don't know whether that's still the case in 2018. It was the first year, I believe, they were starting to bring it in of they're trying to be more responsible in the race in terms of the environment. So in 2018, when I did it, Adidas were providing free reusable cups. They're quite cool, actually. They had a little thumb ring, and they would collapse in your hand. And then en route, they would actually have refillable stations. So I know they have the refillable stations this year. Whether you can have a cup provided, I don't know. But that's something we'll talk about when we do in the race. But they do. It's one of the few races where they do actually invite small hydration packs. They have to be a certain size, so make sure you check online for that. But also you can have collapsible, refillable cups, for example. But they did give those away the year I did it. Whether they'll have that this year, I don't know.
I seem to remember the maximum is like 2 litres. You'll have to fact check that for me, but it's 2 litres. But you know what? I have a hydration vest. In the first year I ran it with my hydration vests. They are allowed. But I don't carry anything more than a litre's worth of liquid anyway, because it starts to get really, really heavy.
Yeah.
But you're right. Let's talk more about this when we get to the aid stations, when we talk about on race day.
Yeah, but in terms of an expo, very efficient. And it's funny, before me and Yimmy said, like, how would you describe this race? And we both had written down 3 words, and they were exactly the same, of fast, flat, and efficient. Yeah. And that actually is across the board from expo to the finish line. So a very efficient expo. They do everything they can to make that as seamless as possible. But having said that, it is obviously a major marathon. It's going to be very populated, particularly on the Saturday. So just expect that. Turn up with plenty of time, and make sure, of course, have that start card and ID being the most important there.
Yeah, well. 100%.
Brilliant. So in terms of pre-race, what I did want to bring up is also, I thought in terms of maybe the best in terms of all of the majors in like what they have available activity-wise pre-race. So from the Wednesday to Saturday, they have what they call the Hall of Fame photo ops. That's quite fun and quirky. It's basically all these cutouts of kind of Hall of Fame athletes that you can have photo opportunities around. On the Friday evening, I believe it's 6:15 this year, there's the Meet the Legends. Did you go to that at some point?
No, I didn't actually, because I got off the plane and went straight to the expo.
Yeah.
But I seem to remember it was re-shown on social media, so I didn't go. Whilst I didn't go, I thought I'm going to go and rush off to the expo and get my bib to avoid the big crowds on the Saturday.
Yeah.
So I didn't go and see it.
Yeah, it's an option there. So it's just something to know. If you're get there earlier, you've already been to the expo, plan to go a different day, that's on the Friday evening. On the Saturday morning, there is the breakfast run. That's really good. So that's 9:30 a.m. this year. And it's basically a relaxed 6 km route. And that actually goes from Schloss Charlottenburg to the Olympic Stadium. So that's really cool. So that, again, ticking off kind of another part of sightseeing that you would want to do when you're in Berlin.
That run to I did the friendship. There wasn't one in 2021, but they brought it back last year. They called it the friendship run. And I feel a bit shortchanged now, because I know that in previous years they run to the Olympic Stadium. And last year there was something going on at the Olympic Stadium, which meant we couldn't go there. And we ended up running a lap of the airfield.
Not quite as fun.
At Tempelhof, which wasn't as fun, but it wasn't as scenic. But I would say that the atmosphere on the friendship run is brilliant.
Yeah.
And I remember my videos, my video footage from just getting in the start line. I was with our friend Divad.
Mr. Divad.
Mr. Divad, who I ran the Berlin Marathon with last year. And it was just a lot of fun. You could see the different countries that show up. The Italians show up and make a big noise. And, the Spanish turn up and they make an even bigger noise. And it's just lots of noise, lots of fun. And you can see the camaraderie amongst the runners. And that's something we can talk about during the race as well. I have done, when I was on business in Berlin, I have done my own run to the Olympic Stadium. And I've got to say, it is an epic place.
Yeah.
You see that stadium, they still got the Olympic rings up. It's in that Art Deco sort of style. that sort of building, and it's just incredible to see. And you actually get to go inside the stadium as well, which I never managed to do. But actually, just going into that stadium must be something else. So it's worthwhile doing it. It's free. It's a turn up and run.
Free race.
And you get some. And last year, even when we did it at Tempelhof, we still got some like bagels and water afterwards and met loads of people. So definitely, I would say, shake out the nerves, go and do that 5K shakeout run. It was the first time, it was 6K this year. It was the first time I'd actually done a shakeout run pre-race. And I thought actually didn't tire me out at all. And if anything, it shook out some of the nerves, which is what it's designed to do.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely 9:30 a.m. on the Saturday, nice and relaxed, 6 km. It's a reasonable pace. That's the whole point of it. It's not a fast run. It's really meant to be slow, and it's just a way to get yourself excited, tick off again some sightseeing, and just really start to soak up that atmosphere, which if you're making all of that effort to go to Berlin to do that, it's good to be part of that. So that's 9:30 a.m. Also on the Saturday at 2 p.m. at the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, there's a marathon prayer, if that's your thing as well. On the Saturday as well is the skating race. So they do an inline skating marathon. So even just that's a thing to see. You don't see that every day. And again, just gives you that starting excitement as well.
Yeah, that I highly recommend on that Saturday. I went for a little mooch. I picked up my bib on the Friday. I went and did the friendship run on the Saturday morning. Then afterwards, I went and careful not to spend too much time on your feet on Saturday. Yeah. Berlin is a big walking city. You can spend a lot of time walking. I did make my way over to the Wall of Legends at the Athletes Village, which is the start-finish line. It's really fun because there's like a diagonally opposite the Brandenburg Gate, there's a great selfie opportunity. You can take your photo of yourself with the Brandenburg Gate behind you, but you also get to find your name on the wall of Berlin Legends. And then afterwards, you just come down from the stand where that is. It's actually on top of like a hut, which is like selling Adidas merch again, where you can buy stuff. Didn't stop us from going and having another look. And then you walk up the Strasse 17th of Juni and you walk past the Soviet War Memorial, which most people miss on marathon day, but you'll see the little tank there. And you get to the finish line and you can watch the inline skating finish happen right in front of you. And you get to see all of the, it's really, really cool. And it's so fast.
Yeah. If you're worried about being slow, it'll make you feel better about yourself. You're like, you know what? Like, I'm never going to be able to compete with these guys.
If they get round in an hour.
It's crazy. Crazy. And no, you can't wear your skates on the Sunday. That's something to point out. Only on the Saturday.
Absolutely,
they won't be allowed on the Sunday. But yeah, we're both in agreement there. Like, definitely really cool. You can't really miss it actually if you're in the centre of the city. With that going on, obviously the course will be closed to that, but definitely stop and have a little watch.
Yeah,
it's something to see. And then you have the award ceremony on the Sunday night. And there's also a post-race party at 8 p.m. as well at the Metropole. And that's €5 if you want to do that. It's not something I've personally done. I don't think you have either, Yimmy.
No, I haven't been to it.
Thing. But again, nice way to meet people, especially if you're going on your own or don't have friends and family there. And it's just a nice way to celebrate. And there's usually some food involved. So in terms of activities going on around the race, I would put it up there probably with the top of the majors there. It's quite impressive.
Agreed.
The amount of stuff that they put on.
Agreed.
Shall we talk about race day?
Yes, let's do that.
That's what we are all here for. So something to be aware of in advance and to communicate this if you've got any loved ones coming to see you is that the start line is strictly only for participants, the start area. I know that other majors that sometimes you can have your relatives come and see you off at the start area. Obviously, they can't be close to the start line, but Berlin is strictly only for participants. So I would just plan to see them on the course, essentially.
Yeah.
There's no parking around it, so public transport and on foot's going to be your go-to. And that opens this year from 7 a.m. With the 4 wave starting from 9 a.m.
Yeah, it's quite a late start compared to somewhere like Chicago. Yeah. Very similar to London. In fact, my start time for Berlin and London was like 10:40. They were both almost identical start times. It's not a super early start. But the one massive advantage of Berlin, I think, is that the course is flat and it's fast. Yeah. And it's also one of only 2 loop races in the World Marathon Majors series. So the other one being Chicago. Being Chicago, of course. But it starts and finishes in exactly the same place. So actually the athletes' village where you drop your bag is where you go and pick up your bag afterwards. And it's literally 7 minutes walk from Hauptbahnhof, which is the main railway station in Berlin. Very, very easy to get to by foot. As you've mentioned already, the public transportation system is super efficient. There are actually 2 systems there. There's the U-Bahn and the S-Bahn, and they are interconnected. Yeah. But you can use a single ticket for both of those, but it's super efficient. The other thing I would say is that my experience of hotels in Berlin is that there's a real big celebration of the marathon in Berlin. Which is nice. So all of them will do pasta party the night before. All of them will have early start breakfasts in the morning. Yeah. And then it's easy to get there. Like you say, I 100% agree. Get your family to drop you off just outside the Reichstag, which is where the entranceway is into the athletes' village. And that is athletes only and participants only. And that's where your wristband really comes in. Yeah. You need to show your wristband to get through security, and they will check your bags. There will be a bag search as you walk in. Very, very efficient, as you would expect of being a German event. And then it's up to you. You can chill out in the athletes' village where there's water, there's bananas that they give out. Or you can go straight to the bag drop and drop your bag before getting in that infamous toilet queue.
There is also changing tents there and showers at both the start and the finish. We'll obviously talk about the finish line later. Our tips about the toilet queues. I know Yimmy will be able to speak for the men on the urinals. In terms of the toilet queues, they are in a bit of a weird place, often on major pathways, which seems a bit odd, but as I always say, make sure you walk down to the very end. So many times I'll leave a friend in the line and I'll go for a little wander, and there's so many shorter queues further down. So especially for the ladies, if you're not able to use the urinals, make sure you really walk down that line and chat to people. I always have some amazing chats while waiting in the urinal queues, and you get to find out, what people are running for and what majors they've done. People can't wait to be asked. Is what I'll say.
I think you're absolutely right. For the men, same thing. Walk down, find shorter queues, shorter portaloos. But actually, there are so many urinals. You walk through. So you go from the main start line area where the big screen is, and everyone watches the elites go off because it's an epic start. We'll talk about that in a minute. You get this whole column of runners coming through, and you watch it on the big screen, and all the elites go off and everyone cheers. And then you walk from that sort of area into sort of through Tiergarten, which is the big park in central Berlin, and you come out on the main stretch, which is where the start finish line is. And just before you get there, you walk through this wooded area, and suddenly out of nowhere, you find these urinals. And I was surprised to see them in 2021. And again, I saw them in 2022. And when I ran Berlin on holidays only a couple of weeks ago, I actually did do a quick video and say, reminder, in that wooded area, there are urinals. There's no privacy, by the way. So if you get stage fright, go and queue up for a portaloo. But you'll realize very quickly that the Europeans are very, very liberal.
Yes.
So it was bizarre. I was like, 1 minute I'm stood there, having a wee, and the people are just walking past me, and it's like, "Oh, how you doing? Oh, it's good to see you again." And it's like,
what
I don't really need to be
on?
I don't really need to be having this conversation right now. I'm focused on other things. But if you do get stage fright, there are plenty of Portaloos, as you say. Meg, great advice. Just walk further down. You always find a shorter queue somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking of the start, really important, again, making sure that timing chip is there on your shoe, making sure that you've got your bib, and making sure that you have your wristband on to get into that starting area. The actual race will start off from 9:15 a.m. for the runners. Me and Yimmy were talking about the type of runners you find. It's really inclusive in terms of its guided runners. I know Yimmy saw a lot of them in the year he did it. 2018 for me, I run all my races for charity, and I've also done some big costumes. So for me, I was a little bit sad personally. It's nothing against the organization of the race, but I was personally sad the year I did it. I think I saw 2 charity vests and no costume at all. So it's very much the main driving force that I find for people doing Berlin is they want to do a major marathon, and it's quick and fast. So it's an efficient race, and people are doing it for efficiency. It's something I just remember having done London 3 times at that point. It definitely took me back a little bit. It was very different in terms of so few vests and so few costumes. That doesn't mean that's wrong. It's just, again, interesting. Having done a number of the majors now, it's interesting to see a very different contrast. So that's something to look out for. But loved how inclusive they were with the guided runners. I don't know if you...
I thought that too. I remember seeing one guy, and he called himself the Iron Man, and he literally carried an ironing board with him. He was running for charity, and he actually did the 4 majors that I did last year. And I saw him again. He was in Chicago. But apart from him and the guy who has the pineapple on his head,
Mr. Pineapple Man,
Mr. Pineapple Head, and who we saw in New York as well, there wasn't any. I agree with you. There wasn't any charity costumes. There were a few charity vests that I saw, but the guided runners were definitely there. But I think, it reminded me a bit of New York, where we made the same observation in New York, and I'm sure we will talk about it when we do the New York podcast. But the one thing that I did really like about Berlin was the camaraderie amongst the runners.
Yes.
As I mentioned, the friendship run, you've got the Italians, you've got the Spanish, you've got all the different nations coming down there. And it reminded me of Chicago in a way, where people actually do want to chat to you as you run. And I know this, as you know, I do my mile by mile dedications. The number of times I got photo bombed on my videos, and people going, "Hi, I want to say hi to such and such, and like, where are you from, etc." And people want to strike up a conversation. I thought that was really, really nice in terms of the atmosphere. Despite the fact that there were no charity costumes, you only really get to see that in London. I think, which is a real shame, because I quite like the colour that brings, the variety that brings to a major event like a major marathon.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation. And we'll talk about sort of the atmosphere in the race and spectatorship. But what I would say is 100% in line with what you've just said, Yimmy, is that the camaraderie, actually, especially at the start, is fantastic. And if you are there on your own and you don't know anyone, people are really chatty. Most people there are purposely there to do one of the majors. And love to talk about it. So you're all doing a major marathon. So if you don't know how to start a conversation, just start there. And I thought Berlin did a really good job at bringing about that atmosphere, especially as we'll talk about the start line in a second and how they go about sort of doing that energy. But in terms of it, as I say, it starts at 9:15. With the runners, and there's 4 waves. You find out your starting block on your race number, and usually if it's your first marathon or if you're unsure of timings, you will be in that final wave.
Yeah, And they are very strict, by the way. The marshals do check.
Yeah.
And they do look at the race bibs, and they will push you back to the previous pen. But don't worry, that it's one long stretch. And my advice is get to the pen early.
Yeah.
And the reason why you want to get to the pen early is because, and you and I talked about this before we started recording this podcast, Meg, the warm-up is
epic.
Phenomenal. Mm-hmm. It is epic. And I still get the hairs on the back of my neck standing up when I think about my experience in both 2021, repeated in 2022. I know you had the same experience in 2018 as well. It's legendary. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, Meg.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, Berlin, the organizers do a really good job at turning those nerves into excitement and really encourage that camaraderie. So normally, as I say, you might be someone who gets to the start line a little early if you're nervous, but it's definitely something to get yourself there in good time, because the music is pumping. They purposely pick songs that are going to get you excited. I double checked with Yimmy if it was the same for his Berlin marathons, but they play at some point this Greek music and get everyone almost dancing from side to side. And that song builds up in momentum. And it was a real goosebump moment. It was one of those things where you want to get your phone out because you kind of want to show off and record it for later to show your friends and family, because you're like, I can't believe this. This is amazing. And that's exactly the kind of atmosphere you want to instill, right, and encourage people. So I think, it was legendary.
I still remember that dancing left to right thing. And then they also do this clap thing. Yes. And you hear this drum and everyone claps.
Yeah.
And then this drum again and everyone claps. And then it gets faster and faster and faster. And your excitement just builds while you're stood in that queue. And you look down in front of you and there's one straight mile-long wall of people, a wall of people going down. And you look behind you and you look to your left and your right, and everyone's in a line and everyone's clapping. But there's always one guy who just cannot clap in time. Everyone's clapped and they go.
I did admit to Yimmy, I said all girl, because usually it is me. He's out of time with the clapping. I'll own that right now.
It's so funny and it gets everyone fired up. And then it's almost like a rolling start. So you run under the gantry, and the next wave gets released and they're walking along. And they get to the gantry and they run through the gantry, and it's all very, very efficient, as we've pointed out.
Yeah, so we'll keep saying that word efficient, and it will work in your favor. So it's efficient, but that's the thing, that in order for it to be efficient, they need everyone to play their part. So it's one of those things where they'll be quite strict on you if you're not following the rules, whether that be on the transport, at the expo, in the start line. But for that, it's all for a good experience. As long as and the rules, they're not complicated, so don't get yourself stressed about it or nervous about it. It is very clear. Just go with what they've asked, and you'll have a really pleasant, efficient race. In terms of, I know a big question that gets asked is, can I wear headphones? Yes, you can, but they do very much encourage you not to. Especially at Berlin, they want you to, be part of the atmosphere, to hear things, but there's no rules against it. They just will encourage you not to.
Funny enough, I wore my headphones in 2021 for most of the race. 2022, I think the crowd was different. We'll talk about the crowd a bit later, but the atmosphere was definitely better in 2022 as they were coming more, longer time after the pandemic and the crowd's back. But the crowd and the atmosphere does make it one of those courses where you can actually just enjoy the atmosphere of the people and the crowd and the runners around you. Just talking a little bit about the course itself. I remember when I did it the first time in 2021, I just found it really interesting at the start, but then it got very samey. And you got these wide big European avenues. So if you've ever spent any time on the continent, either in Paris or in Berlin, you've got these big wide avenues, these big straight roads, and that's why you've got lots of space. There are one or two areas where it does tighten up a little bit on the course, but generally it's all these big wide European avenues. And I found it very samey. And it was only after I ran it the second time, and then only a couple of weeks ago, as I mentioned, I was on holiday there, and I went and ran the first 16 miles of the Berlin Marathon course, as you do. But you realize there's actually quite a lot to see of Berlin on the course itself, right? So, just to throw a few things out there, you've got the Reichstag. So before you even got to the end of mile 1, you've got the victory column.
Yep.
And that's beautiful to see. And then at the end of mile 4, going into mile 5, you've got the right. You come back here and you do go to the Reichstag, and then you're in East Berlin, and you run around Alexanderplatz, and you see the Berlin Tower. You see it at least 3 times in 3 different angles as you run past it. Yeah. And you cross over and you run all the way. It's almost like a wide bat shape all around Berlin, central Berlin. So you do actually get to take in quite a lot of it. And a lot of if you keep your eyes open, there's lots of churches. You get to, as you come back towards the end, you run past the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, as you mentioned. You'll know it because it's the church that has the broken steeple.
Yeah.
And the nickname for it is the Hollow Tooth. You pass that at the end of kilometer 34, and then you've only got 8 kilometers to go. Yeah. You run past a big department store called KaDeWe, which is their equivalent of Harrods, I guess, or Selfridges, which is beautiful to see. And in that area, you've got the shopping district. And around that shopping district, I always laugh because I mentioned this to you earlier. You run past this big sports store, and there's usually a massive, 5-story high picture of Kipchoge running on the side of the wall. Yeah. It's the year I did it last year, he got the world record again. I know he's going to be running it this year. And we all as we ran past, we all saluted his photo as we ran past.
The marathon
he's an absolute legend.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you're into sort of the last part of the marathon course. You run through Potsdamer Platz, which is all a redeveloped modern area, before you then do a little weave around East Berlin. And you get to the sort of place where you get the market. And the market building, is the place where there's 2 domes. And it's a beautiful building that you run past, and you've only got 1.5 miles left before you get to the finish line. But we'll come to talk about the finish line in a moment. Yeah. But there's so much of the city that you can see. If you do a little bit of research beforehand, you'll spot things as you go around, and you'll recognize the significance of them. So do a bit of homework and a bit of research before you go. Maybe even if you get there early, do what I did. And actually, when I was on holidays, I jumped on the boat tour.
Yeah.
And that takes you through down the Spray, which is the river there. And they point out a lot of historical buildings, and you just have a better understanding of what you're actually looking at as you run around.
Yeah, great advice. It's good to do. I find with any of the majors, either do the boat tour the day before or the day after, just to save your legs. But it's usually a great way to hear more about the city. In terms of, I don't know what your experience was the year you did it. I certainly, the start line was epic in terms of the atmosphere. Once the race actually started, I'm usually around the 4-hour mark. I did find it a little frustrating at the start, if I'm honest, because it was very bottleneck. It's a very populated race. But once you get past that column, it does start to spread out a bit, and you do get into wider areas. But that's just something, again, with any start line, really stick to your own pace. Don't get too excited with the crowd. But I did find, especially around the 4-hour area that I was in, it can get a little bit bottleneck, which can be a bit frustrating if, again, you want that fast pace. But just keep with your pace, try and find the spaces. And after the column, when you've got a bit more wider roads, that does even out, and the roads tend to get wider as you go along.
I saw, my experience of being a 5-hour marathon runner, there was a bit more space. I think I didn't get that bottlenecking. I think that after the first corner, you turn and you kind of run through a little bit of an industrial part.
Yeah.
And the road there is actually, when I saw it, when I ran there a couple of weeks ago, I actually wondered whether I'd gone the right way, because I thought, I can't remember it being this narrow.
Yeah.
So generally the roads are really, really wide.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of spots, especially when you cross over the bridge, for example, after you've gone through past Alexanderplatz and the Berlin Tower, you do actually run over a little bridge, and you get to see the Berlin Tower on your right hand side. There is a little bit that you weave through that is quite tight, and I just remembered that, although the road was tight, I found that there wasn't too much congestion.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the experience I had in London this year, where they actually put a crossing in a really, really silly place on Romney Road, and the whole thing came to a complete standstill. I actually stopped.
Yeah.
It was that congested. I never found that in Berlin. There wasn't really a jostling. Quite like when some places, if you remember in Chicago that we had, where there were one or two places where we got bumped by people because it just got really, really tight. But generally I found there was enough space. Maybe that was because of my experience in the pen behind what would have been the pen that you ran in.
And I think it changes from race to race. I think it's something you can potentially expect from any of the majors. Remember, they're a major marathon. They usually are the highest, most populated races out of all of them in the world. So you can expect that. And it depends. If you're a little bit ahead, sometimes you're lucky and there's less. I think around the 4-hour mark usually tends to be like the most populated section of the race, between 4 and 5 hours. Anything before or after that might be a little less. And again, you just don't know on the day. So I just want to pre-warn you, especially I found that at the start, if you are in an area that's very populated and you're getting frustrated by a little bit of a bottleneck, just, don't let that ruin your enjoyment of the race. Just trust that the roads do get a lot wider. Just stick at your pace, find the gaps where you can, but just know that will widen out. In terms of some extra like logistical things, there are paces for the Berlin Marathon. They're from 3 hours to 5 hours. Again, like that's a bit unusual. Usually we'll have ones in races after the 5-hour mark, but not for Berlin, at least not this year. It's 3 to 5 hours. There will be paces for you. And there is a time limit of 6 hours 15 is the cutoff. So you would have to be at 38.5 kilometers by 4 p.m. And then, like we said, our 3 top words, and along with efficient, was fast and flat. With those wider roads and a very flat course, it is very fast and it is very flat. So there's very small elevation. It goes up to 57 meters peak. We worked out it's about 29 kilometers in, didn't we, Yimmy? And that's actually a very gentle incline starting from 20 kilometers.
Yeah, it's so slight. You don't even notice it, to be honest. I mean, and I think that's you're right. It starts so early. I think it's 20 kilometers, and by the time you get to the peak of it, you haven't even noticed it. It's not like New York where you're doing those bridges, or Boston where you've got those rolling hills, and finishing off with Heartbreak Hill, and it's nothing like that at all. It's so gentle. You don't even notice it. But speaking of efficiency, the other thing that's really good about the Berlin Marathon is aid stations.
Yes.
So I think there are 15 aid stations. They start around mile 3. You don't really need anything before then anyway, at 5K. And then basically there's a few more early ones, and then they're about once every 2 miles or so. And then after mile 25, they're just over 1 mile between each of the aid stations. And what you'll find is that the water comes in cups, but they don't come in paper cups that you can pinch and drink. They come in what look like hard plastic cups, but I have a feeling they're actually made from corn syrup.
Yeah, so Berlin is very good about the environment. Yeah, very impressive.
Their eco credentials are really quite strong, and they major on that. So Wouldn't be surprised if they're actually recyclable or compostable eco cups, but they make a hell of a noise. I just remember this clacking sound as people crushing these plastic cups.
It's like there are other Monty Python.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But there are 6 other aid stations that will give out fruit tea, which is actually, it used to be this beet juice thing, but now it's tea and it's equally disgusting. I avoid it. But what's really good is they also give out, there's a couple of Morton's gels stations as well. And Morton's is my gel of choice. So do try it because it is more of a jelly texture rather than the syrupy texture. I think when Divad got one the first year he did Berlin, he basically almost vomited because it wasn't the texture he was expecting when he squeezed it into his mouth. But I tried them out beforehand. The other thing that's really, really good that I loved about Berlin, because I get hungry in my tummy, especially in marathons, late on in the marathons, they give out lots of fruit. So apples, bananas that they've already peeled for you. That's like half bananas and they're all ready to go. And you just basically give them a squeeze and you've got a bit of banana. And that's really, really nice. And the other thing, as a tailwind user, I carry my own soft flasks with me. I was just looking around for my tailwind bottle. They're very good at refilling hydration vests and water bottles as well. So I normally carry a bottle of tailwind with me, ready mix, and I drink that. It takes me to about halfway. I've got another bottle that's got the powder in and it's empty, and I just ran up to the aid station. They've got people with jugs filling up your bottles. So that's really, really easy and really efficient.
Yeah, so plenty of them, really efficient. With the water refills, they also sometimes have guys with like backpacks on with little taps as well. So yeah, they've really thought about it all there. It's really useful. And Yimmy's always mentioned it, but I have to mention it again as a coach. Definitely practice beforehand. I would go against trying anything new on the day. So you should be trying to nail your nutrition by now anyway, with how soon it is, less than a month to the race. But with any race you do, check out what the food sponsor is, check out what the drink sponsor is. And if it's something that you plan on taking the day, it can't hurt you at all just to try it out and get your stomach used to it. You don't want to have an upset tummy on the day because you're having something you weren't expecting. The more prepared you are, just the more helpful it's going to be.
Do you know what's funny? Because Morton's tagline at the moment is "Get used to it."
Yeah, it's good.
So
good tagline.
quite appropriate, really. 2 other things I would point out, or 3 things I would point out. What's really cool about Berlin is, and I noticed this first in Berlin. I think they tried to do it in Boston as well, but it rained, so I think it washed away. The blue line markers are the Adidas 3 stripes. I love that.
Yeah, it's such a cool little touch.
They have this video, in fact, a couple of days before the race, when they start marking the roads. It's a couple of nights before the race. They have this little cart that drives around, putting the 3 stripes on the ground. And if you have a couple of days and you're extra there, and you get there early before the expo, go walk around the bridge where you cross over from Hauptbahnhof, the main train station, over towards the Reichstag. You'll run over it on the old bridge. You'll run over it on race day. But if you look down on the ground, you'll see where the marks are still there from previous marathons, which is really, really cool. I just remember seeing it. I'm thinking like Adidas really, really nailed this. The other thing to remember, of course, is that the markers are in km.
Yeah.
So don't get to 21 thinking I've only got 5 miles to go, right? Because you're only halfway. Thinking I know it's
in a blinder today.
Yeah, absolutely. So remember it's in km, and there are loads and loads of drummers and bands on the route. And that's what makes it really, really fun. The Germans, they love their sort of music on the route. So they'll have people drumming away. You can hear them from quite far away. And they also have they had a brass band playing last year at some point. And so there's lots of entertainment on the way to keep you fired up.
Yeah, and for anyone, if you're new to the marathon, you don't understand what we were talking about in terms of the Adidas line. So for most major races, if not all of them, the organizers will paint onto the pavement a marathon line. You'll see it, especially if you've ever seen a marathon on the TV. The marathon line is basically, if you ran exactly on that line, that would be the exact 26.2 distance of the marathon. That's not to say don't worry, if you're not on that line at all times, you've not run the distance. But essentially what that is that's the most efficient route. So if you you'll certainly see the elite sticking to that line like a bad smell. But if you see other people gravitating towards it, that is what that marker is there. That's the exact measurement of the route. So it goes to stand. The closer you are to that line, that's the more efficient route. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the marathon line.
Yeah.
Go.
Other thing to point out, massage stations. Do you want to talk about massage stations?
Yes.
Crazy.
So something very unusual. So Yimmy obviously mentioned the massages available at the Expo. There's also free massages at the end, which we'll talk about that. But unusually, they also offer free massages en route, which is very rare for a marathon. This year, they'll start from 25 kilometers and then they're every 5 kilometers. I can see Yimmy shaking his head. It's something I've never personally done because I fear that if I got a massage partway, I wouldn't get back up again. I think Yimmy's the same. But just interesting to know that's there.
You know what? I saw these people. They almost lay out camp beds.
Yeah.
And the most dangerous thing a marathon runner can do is either sit in a deck chair or lie on a camp bed, because you know exactly, or a hammock, exactly that. Anything like that sort of material sort of seat or bed, because you know you're getting in that thing, you're not getting out of it in a hurry.
Yeah,
right. So I saw people at 30 kilometers last year, getting their legs massaged and getting stretched out on these hammocks. And I was thinking, like, I'd never go down on one of those things because I would just never get back up again. But you know what? If it's helpful to you, then go for it. Yeah, right? Why not?
It's cool that they do it. So it's just something to know. If you really are so far down the struggle bus and like you've got such bad cramp you can't move, just know that from 25 km onwards, every 5 kilometers, that's an option. So I think it's cool that it's an option, even if you wouldn't take it. Also, in terms of aid stations, they're pretty good with the Vaseline, holding them out on sticks if you need that as well. And then should we talk about the spectatorship? Because I feel that's something we've actually had differing experiences on.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about the famous Berlin crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really passionate about it. I've got to say, I had very different experiences between 2021 and 2022. 21, there were so many dead spots. And maybe that was to be expected. We were just coming out of the pandemic. And there were just, even where the crowd were there, they weren't very vocal at all. Yeah. I remember actually in 2021, in the last 2 miles running past a cafe, and people were just sat there drinking their beers and just watching, and nobody was cheering. And I was like, and I ran past and said, "Well, give us a cheer then," and I reverse cheered them, and one of them shouted, "I'll have a beer waiting for you," which is that's nice.
Yeah.
But very reserved crowd. But 2021, the crowd were back. There were still some quiet spaces, particularly around Mitte, as you get into sort of like 12, 13 kilometers. It was a bit quiet around there after Alexanderplatz. But otherwise, when the crowd were there, at the end, it was pretty epic around that shopping district around Cadaway, up past the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church. Potsdamer Platz was busy. And then you kind of get into the quieter zone, actually, as you run through some of the streets coming back into Berlin again, as you double back on yourself. And it was quiet until you got to that market square.
Yeah.
And there were lots of people there. And then it quietened down a bit on the left turn, then the right turn, and then the final left turn into into the final stretch, Pariser Platz.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it gets really, really mental, and it was really loud, but still quite reserved, I thought. How was your experience in 2018?
Yeah, so 2018 was really disappointing on the spectatorship side of things. Really? And that's why I think it's so important to have these shared experiences and talk about them, because they're so different, right? You could have just gone on my opinion on 2018, and that's completely different to Yimmy's 2021, for example. I was speaking to people after the race being like, is that normal? I've never experienced such a quiet race. And there was a few Berliners saying like, actually, that's the quietest I've ever found it. Right. So when I did it in 2018, I was really surprised. It was so quiet. And it wasn't what I found so unusual is it wasn't even like, there was plenty of people there watching, but they were literally watching. They weren't clapping. They weren't cheering. And I remember thinking, like, why are you here? I heard a few English spectators like cheering on and a few American spectators. But other than that, there was so many areas that, like you said, there's a few dead spots with not many people. But what I was so surprised is there were so many populated spots, but nobody actually cheering on. Even when I finished the race, kind of similar to you in it, after the race, like as you get closer to the Brandenburg Gate, there's even more people, and actually there's lots of man-made crossings because it's a very touristy area, trying to get people across. And even people standing there's bottlenecks of people at the side of the road waiting to cross, with people still running past. And everyone's just letting people run past, not saying a word. And people are so close to the finish line. And it was me there, and I was with Gary and Sharpie. And it was down to us to go like, come on. And we were saying to the people around us, like, cheer. And when we encouraged people, it was kind of like they woke up from a dream and were like, oh, yeah, and clapped a bit. But that to me was so unusual.
I didn't get that in 21 or 22 at the end. Both at the Brandenburg Gate, it was pretty mental in terms of the noise level.
Yeah.
Not quite the same volume as, say, Tower Bridge in London or First Ave in New York. All I would say, Meg, is wait till you get to Tokyo.
Okay.
Because it is the weirdest thing. It's like Tokyo is like silent disco.
That's amazing.
All the people are there. They're all paying attention to something, but nobody's making any noise at all. They're not even clapping, or they're clapping so politely you can't even hear.
I feel like that was my Berlin 2018. So maybe
I feel like you might need to go back there just to experience it again, because 22 was definitely a step up on 21. And I didn't need my headphones for the whole race, although there were some quiet zones. I was talking to other runners. So do, I think, go back there and have another sample of the Berlin atmosphere. But I did get my name called out, although it wasn't that often. I did get my name called out maybe 50 times for the whole race.
That's not
versus
too bad.
200 before I'd even got halfway in London. That's, just to contrast it. But, the one thing I would say is that when you run past that market, as I said, there's a left turn, a right turn, and a left turn into Pariser Platz again. And you see the Brandenburg Gate ahead of you.
Yeah.
Right. And this is my top tip for Berlin. The Brandenburg Gate you end up running towards, and it's like a homing beacon, right? My top tip is that is not the finish line.
I am completely with you here. There's a top tip. So for me, actually, once you get to the gate, that's when actually that was the noisiest part of the race for me.
Yeah.
But yes, that if we can give you any advice to save you some heartache, is when you get through that gate, it is not the end. I'll let you carry on, Yimmy, but I wholeheartedly agree.
There's 400 meters to go, because you know what it's like. You think you see the finish line and you go all out. You pour your whole heart out, and you are burning every single muscle, every fiber of your being, and you're focused on that.
To the gate.
you get through there and you think, oh my God, the finish line is all the way down.
Yeah.
But what I will say is one thing to pay attention to when you run through that gate, and there are different arches that you can run through, and this is my favorite subject. There is a photographer on the other side of every single arch. So when you feel like you're dying and you've realized that there's another 400 meters to go, at least put a smile on your face, because you will get
let them catch your "this isn't the end" face.
Absolutely, because you will have this. I've got it from both years. I've got this epic photo of me running through the Brandenburg Gate. So I'll put on my hang loose or my victory signs or my fist in the air, run through there, get your race day finish line pose on with the Brandenburg Gate behind you, and it's pretty epic. But don't make the mistake that lots of people do, thinking that is the finish line there, because it's not.
That is literally advice that's worth its weight in gold, everybody. Yimmy has just done you a solid right there. So think of the Brandenburg Gate. That is your pre-celebration beacon. So when you're in the race, like, you might forget because you might have marathon brain and you're tired, and you'll just see that gate and you're like, I'm almost there. In your head, think the gate is your time to get ready for your photo. So once you get through the arches, be ready for your smile and photo, and then get ready for the last 400 meters.
That's exactly
Don't let them catch you in the gate with a face of disappointment and disbelief that that's not the end. If we can save you that now, I think we're going to turn around some photos for you, everybody.
And staying on the photos for a moment, when you cross that finish line, right, keep going with a big smile on your face and your arms up in the air for another 10, 15 meters or so.
Not minutes,
the reason why,
just meters.
Just meters. Not. It's not far. It's not far. Because there's usually a big gantry and a crane behind the finish line, with you running through the finish line, and you ideally should have your big arms up in the air moment. I've got about 15 photos of me stopping my Strava and on my watch.
I didn't count.
Oh, right. You know what? It's going to make no difference at all. You're going to go by chip time, right? So, another 10 seconds ain't going to matter on your time. But I would say definitely just make sure that you get that epic finish line photo. There's usually people sat in front of the finish line gantry as well, taking a picture down the equivalent of the mall of that avenue, that boulevard, with the Brandenburg Gate behind you. It's a nice long shot there. And they are photos, race day photos, finish line photos worth having. They're some of my best ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Brandenburg Gate, and then once you get past that finish line, that is excellent advice. Yimmy never lets me down on letting me know what photo opportunities to look out for. And then in terms of the finish line, congratulations in advance, because everybody is capable of making it. And as I say, it's a flat, fast and efficient race to do so. There are massages at the end. You'll get your medal as you come through. I'm trying to remember what it was like in terms of finish packs. Like, you won't go hungry. They help you out.
No, there's a bag. They give you a bag, and in it there's a protein bar or an energy bar.
Yeah.
There's a banana. There's a bottle of water, and of course, don't forget you get your free half pint of Erdinger alcohol-free beer.
Yeah,
which is really cold. Really. I mean, I don't even drink beer, right? I'm not a big beer fan. Even I liked it. I mean, somebody was saying to me, I remember scoring a beer both in Chicago. Well, I didn't take it in Chicago. It was in New York that I took a beer. And I thought, God, this is refreshing, right? Yeah. And even though I don't like the taste of lager particularly, that alcohol-free lager goes down really, really well. And I'm told it's a real isotonic as well. So
yeah, it's, no, it is. They've got a special isotonic beer. So I gave mine to the boys, but that's something to look forward to as you're running around. Just think about that cold beer at the finish line. As I say, they look after you at the end in terms of your little pack. There are massage stations. Again, your friends and family won't be in that finish area, but to help with the marathon brain, your bag will be where you left it at the start, which is usually very helpful. And also, remembering again, making sure that you're giving that timing chip in. They're pretty good at like blocking your exit without doing it, but just in case something goes awry, remember you want to take that off your foot and give that back.
I think the other couple of things to mention, that's top tip on the giving back, because you will get charged for it if you've hired the one from them.
Yep.
And as I said, if you take those cable ties, it'll be infinitely easier to get that timing chip off your shoe. There's a couple of things. The medal engraving is really cool, right? There's an option to prepay for that. If you haven't done it and you forget to do it, you can pay for it on the day. It's so super efficient. It's not even funny. There's like a row of unlike in London where you queue outside the New Balance store for an hour to get in there and there's 2 people working on it. There are like 15, there's a row of 15 trestle tables with engraving machines, and they see your bib number. They type it in there. They tell you the time. They ask you to write your name down, or it's in the system already. And minutes later, you walk away. And I've got mine on the wall behind me. The other one's in the frame there. I got it done both years. It takes minutes to do, and it's a really, really nice touch.
Yeah. Super efficient, like we said.
Super efficient, yeah. And
I'd say of all of the majors, that is beyond the easiest to get your medal engraved. Most of the other majors, it's like you have to go on a different day, wait outside a store. Berlin make it so easy for you.
Yeah, I think Chicago, you have to walk to the Nike store to get it done. I think Boston, it was the same. It was marathon. Either you had to go to, I think it was Marathon Sports. You had to queue up there.
Yeah.
And there's another, Under Armour did them as well. I went and got mine on Under Armour, for example. But it's right there in the big tent set up. And if all else fails, when it gets really, really busy, they take your medal, they take it around the back, they engrave it for you, and then you walk around the other side and you pick up your medal on the other side. It's that efficient. The other thing that's at the finish line, of course, is the showers, which I know you mentioned earlier. But I would say the one thing to look out for is that the Europeans, well, absolutely, or don't look out for. The Europeans are very, very liberal, and they will literally walk around with everything hanging out on show.
You won't just catch a medal at the finish line.
It won't be the only thing they'll be swinging, I'll say. I mean, people get shocked by it, but literally they don't, people aren't bothered. They just walk out. They're holding their towels next to them. They've just dried themselves off. The only thing they're wearing are a smile on their face and a pair of flip-flops.
And a medal if you're lucky.
And a medal if you're absolutely lucky. But, just if you're shy and you're not that liberal, then just avoid that area. But the showers are available for anyone who wants one.
And changing tents as well. Just to repeat again, because it's important, make sure you give those timing chips back. I think you have until 5:30 p.m. to do it. It's quite spacious, the finish area as well. And then have you got any tips in terms of, because your loved ones can't be in the finished area, what would your suggestions be in terms of meeting up with them, Yimmy?
I think wait outside the Reichstag, because you come out almost in the same place. It's going to be busy anyway, but mobile phone signal's pretty good. Meet outside the Reichstag, or meet in front of the Hauptbahnhof if you want to go straight back to get onto the train to get back to your hotel. What's actually quite nice is you walk out of the finish line area, which is the athletes' village. It's the same as the start line area because it's in the same place. You come out and then you can walk to Brandenburg Gate and then cheer on the late finishers. That's always a nice thing to do. I always make the effort to do that. I get my medal photo in front of the Brandenburg Gate when it's going to be very, very populated. But then I go and stand by the barriers and cheer on the final runners who are coming through. The first year I did it in 2021, I remember you talked about the cutoff being 6 hours 15.
Yeah.
And there's a particular a checkpoint at 38.5 kilometers. That year they also had a rope in front of the Brandenburg Gate.
Yep.
And once they close. I remember seeing them pull the rope across just as a runner arrived, and the whole crowd went mental. We were all shouting, let him through, let him through. We were all like chanting it, shouting it really loud, and they got distracted for a minute, and the runner just carried on, ran past them.
Yes, go on.
And everyone cheered. And then less than 2 minutes later, 3 other runners turned up, and the rope was there closing the course. And they literally dropped to their knees, knowing that there's 400 meters left and they'd missed the cutoff time. Yeah. So it is pretty brutal. I mean, it's as brutal as the Tokyo Marathon. We'll talk about the Tokyo Marathon, not to freak you out, because I know that's the next one that you're planning. But yeah, I think that's something to look out for. But do go and cheer on the other runners. In terms of spectating,
I think it's in front of Paul Loeb House, right? I think is what they call it.
Is it?
Yeah, Paul Loeb House, I believe, is what it's called. That's the reunion area.
Okay, so I think that for spotting you on the course, I'm gonna go by the kilometer markers now here, right? There is a straight line that you can go down. So as you said at the start, don't come to the start line area with you, because they can't come into that area with you anyway. It's a waste of time. They may as well get a lie-in. Your friends and family may as well get a lie-in. I would say go to the Reichstag and go to the bit between the Reichstag and the railway station, around about sort of kilometer between kilometers 6 and 7. Mm-hmm. You go to the Reichstag and you walk straight up, and you should be able to see you running past them. And then all they need to do is just travel south. And they can either walk down, cross the route, which they'll just have to wait for the crossing to happen, and walk down to Potsdamer Platz. And they'll see you again around sort of like kilometer 37, 38. Yeah. And then after they've seen you there, they can hot foot it back to the Brandenburg Gate and see you at the end of 42 kilometers, just before you run through for your 400 meter sprint to the finish. So it's possible and feasible to see you 3 times, once at sort of 7K, once at 37, 38K, and again at 42K. It is possible to walk from Potsdamer Platz back to Brandenburg Gate in the time that it will take you to run round from the end of 38 kilometers to 42 kilometers. So that's maybe a plan that's not too difficult to actually to execute on the day, in terms of just cheer stations to support you.
Yeah, that's excellent advice, and I'd agree with that. And then in terms of at the end, as I mentioned a little bit before, there is a reunion area where it's you can basically find your family. They have like big letters, and it will be the first letter of your last name. So, for example, as a walker, I'd be looking up for the letter W, and you can tell your family to go wait in the W area. And that's where I believe the reunion area is, in front of, I believe they call it Paul Loeb House. So you can go there, but just again, remember that, like same with London, that will be a very populated area. So if there's an area kind of out of the crowd that's nearby, that might be actually easier to meet up with them. But if you want to somewhere where you definitely know you can find them, you're looking for the first letter of your last name in those reunion areas, and that will be all over the information guidance that they give as well. There is also a spectator area at the end that is free to go in, but again, there's only so much space. But there is a big spectator area with a big screen. And they also do play the marathon live on air in Berlin. I think the channels are ARD and RBB. As I'm not German, I'm not too sure about those broadcast channels or how you find them. That's something to look up. But that is something that you can watch live on the telly in Berlin. But they also have a massive screen there at the end, and that spectator stand area. Which is nice touch that it's free. You just obviously got to be aware that can be very popular. There might not be room.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think that just about wraps up the details of the race and stuff. I think just a couple of other things if you're thinking about your time in Berlin. One is that on the Monday, newspaper, on Medal Monday, some really, really good opportunities, actually. Mm-hmm. If you want to go to the Reichstag and get your photo of your medal, you and your medal inside the dome, you do have to book now, and it does get booked pretty quickly. So pre-book. I was there only a couple of weeks ago, and the tickets sell out quickly for the Reichstag. So that's one location.
Yeah.
The other one is the Berlin Tower, but you can normally queue up and get tickets. You can get tickets in advance on that one. It's really, really quick as well. That's worth doing too.
Brandenburg Gate, of course, with the medal.
Brandenburg Gate. It's standard, right? You'll want to go there. But also on the Monday, there's a newspaper that prints the names of all the finishers. And that's pretty cool to get as well. So definitely. I forgot.
I don't even think I knew it was a thing in 2018. So definitely get that.
Yeah. There's the newspaper that prints all the names. Maybe we put that in the show notes, Meg, so that people can find it. And the last thing I would say, because I think we've covered most things, is getting out of Berlin. You think that an international flight, you can get there 2 hours before check-in, get through security, blah blah blah, get onto the flight. The last 3 times that I've been there, 2 of those have been with the marathon. It's taken longer than you think to get through the airport. So just get there early. The checking in bit is easy. The checking in desk is very, very efficient. It's the security that is a nightmare. And I remember last year I made 6 friends out of it because 6 Brits were at the end of
flight, but I've got loads of
we were staring at missing our flight. We walked into the hall. There were like 20 different security search stations, and they were the queue. The hall was completely full, mainly of marathon runners, all trying to get out. And we ended up having to, embarrassingly, I'm ashamed to actually admit, we actually had to push in to the front and say, we are going to miss our flight. And there were some very, very, understandably grumpy looking people. Yeah. And me and 5 other Brits, of course, it was a very funny moment. Our flight was on the last stand in this massive airport.
Movie moment.
And we had to run to get to the actual stand. And I got to say, that alongside getting that timing chip off my shoe was like worse than the last 4 miles of the Berlin Marathon. It was we were all running like the Tin Man down there because we had achy legs and stuff. But do get to the airport early, because not only do you have to get through security, but yes, thanks to our wonderful Brexit decision, we also have to do passport control as well. Yeah. And that, the last time I went through there, it took another sort of 15, 20 minutes just to queue up to get your passport stamped as you leave the country. So build that into your plans, and bear in mind that you're going to have tired legs. So you might not be the quickest mover on the day anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. Get there as early as you can. Like I find on the last day anyway, you're kind of there like you can't really do much, because unless you're in an evening flight, like you're going anyway. So just leave plenty of time.
Yeah.
More than you think you need. I think I found I believe it was Chicago. I think that was a similar case as well. Like we were I think it was Chicago or New York, maybe Chicago, but it was I left loads of time because someone pre-warned me, but that was a really, really long queue getting out. And definitely, as you say, Yimmy's told you that's 3 times in a row with Berlin. That's been the case. So don't finish your trip on a sad note, missing your flight. But you might get 6 friends out of it. But yeah,
6 Strava friends, great.
Yeah, exactly. And you will have tired legs. And another sightseeing thing for the Monday, like we said, if you haven't done the boat trip beforehand, bus tours, they're always good for the Monday. Save your legs.
And the big bus. Yeah, the big bus tour is quite good. It takes you to all the major sites, and you take your medal with you and just do your medal Monday photos. But yeah, just get to the airport early, especially if you're leaving on the Monday. Yeah, you just don't want to miss that flight.
And things like taxis are very popular and stuff. I think I went on the Tuesday, so actually for Berlin, it wasn't too bad for the airport with me, but I did get there a bit earlier. But yes, absolutely, if you're going on the Monday, everything's going to be particularly popular for sure. Great advice.
So how does this rank Meg, in terms of, you've done the 4 of the 6.
Yep.
I mean, how does it rank? Just your opinion, really, in terms of
out of the majors.
Of the majors, yeah.
And I apologise because I see my webcam's a bit fluffy, but that's okay. You can hear me. So the 4 majors, London, absolutely number 1 spot. I know me and Yimmy will sound biased as we're British. Yeah. London's our city. But they're just, for me, like, nothing beats the atmosphere, the camaraderie, the sightseeing. It's just like a non-stop party. Love it. And so London, absolutely at the top. I would then say Chicago, which might surprise a lot of people out of the 4 I've done. I think Chicago, I would say they are the top in terms of looking after you. They went above and beyond in their generosity. We'll talk about the expo. We've got funny stories about that when we do that episode. But in terms of looking after you, making sure everything's clearly signposted, pre and after race, I thought that was very good. And the people there were just so welcoming. I actually got loads of warnings before Chicago of like, be careful, it could be a really dangerous city, etc. And like, yes, you don't want to do silly things in Chicago, but actually couldn't be further from the truth. It was one of the most welcoming cities I've been to. So Chicago, I'd say second. And again, with the route, quite nice flat route. Like I had a piece of glass in my foot, we'll save that anecdote for the podcast. But if you want, I'd say Chicago and Berlin are very similar. If you really want to go for it, those are the 2 marathons to do it on times. Then I would say New York, which would be surprising probably only to Yimmy or anyone who did 2022 New York Marathon, in that it's usually a freezing cold race to the point that you're wearing hats and gloves for like a good chunk of the race. It was actually a heat wave. We were it starts very late. We'll save all the anecdotes for that. But yeah, I'd say New York was third, very hilly, very tough course. And I think, again, I don't want to say too much now because we'll leave it for the New York episode, but I would say, I think I'd be interested. I don't want to do New York again after that experience, but I do think the heat had a lot, the weather had a lot to blame. I feel like New York could be higher up depending on the weather, but New York third. And then 4th for me would actually be Berlin, in that, and that's why everyone's experiences are different. For me, Berlin in 2018 was a very quiet race. And you've got to think of your reasons for running. I think that's really important, right? If you are someone where it's all about time, then something like Berlin's going to be like top of your list, probably, right? It's fast, flat, efficient, it's everything it promises. For me, as a charity runner, as someone who loves the crowd, loves the atmosphere, has done big costumes in the past, I was always going to be slightly disappointed on that, just because it's not really the race for that. And I just was a little let down by the atmosphere. I also had a bit of an injury in Berlin as well. So yeah, I'd say that's my order: London, Chicago, New York, Berlin. What about you, Mr. 6 stars?
I would have I would have put Chicago as my second favorite race coming into 2023.
Yeah.
Right after London. London, 100% agree with you. It's got the crowd, it's got the course, it's got the camaraderie, it's got the variety. Hands down, best marathon in the world, in my opinion. But then since I've run Boston, Boston's become my second, and it's a rolling hills course. It's pretty demanding, but I think it's got a lot to do with the heritage, and I'd love to talk about it on one of your podcasts when we do it. And talking about contrast, it reminded me a lot of Berlin with all the pre-run stuff, the fan fest that they had, which is basically the whole town comes out, and the atmosphere is absolutely electric around the marathon. You've got to be running the marathon or watching the marathon on marathon day, right? On Patriots Day. And then so my sort of third place was then Chicago. But I think that Berlin and Chicago, having been back to Berlin and seen more of the city and seen how much variety and how much of the city you do get to see on the on the course, I actually had ranked them equal third.
Interesting.
I think the friendliness of the people. I mean, of course, I ran a PB in Berlin, and then I beat that PB in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually thought, I just remember I ran Chicago right next to you. We ran all the way together, right? And I just remember how friendly the people were, the crowd were, etc. The crowd were better than Berlin. Yeah. But actually, there was something about the whole efficiency of Berlin that now has edged it back into sort of like equal place with Chicago. Both flat, fast courses.
Yeah.
As I said, I ran a PB in both. Number 5, it might be a surprise to some people because, it's possibly the most dull course, the quietest crowd, the least impressive expo. But in terms of my enjoyment of and the experience of running it, Tokyo is my number 5.
Okay.
And I know I got my PB there, and it is a flat course, right? And although the crowd isn't there, it was actually quite a fun place to go there and enjoy it. And the international runners built up a camaraderie because the crowd weren't cheering you on. So I ran with people and met friends along the way, and it was fantastic. The one I enjoyed the least was New York. And even when I strip away the weather conditions, I thought the course just, I just remember counting on First Avenue when the crowd died down after sort of like 70th Street. Yeah. I was counting every single block, 71, 72, all the way to 125, and then counting them down from 130 back down to 59 again as I came down Fifth Avenue. I mean, I didn't find it fun. I didn't find the variety there. I thought the course was challenging enough as it was without the weather conditions and some of the organizational stuff. I won't go into too much now. I'm going to try and put on my objective
that
hat.
Episode. Yes. It is hectic. Yes. I actually can't wait to do that episode.
I'm going to have to put on my Mr. Objective hat on just so I can be balanced about it. But you know what, Meg? I do have a redemption run coming up for New York someday. It won't be this year. Yeah. Maybe next year. I don't know. But yeah. I'd love to run it again just to prove myself wrong in terms of my impressions.
Because that was going into it, everyone was like, oh, because we would sing London's praises and pretty much everyone was like, oh, but you haven't done New York yet. Just wait for New York. New York's the best. So it would be interesting. I'd even be interested to see because coming into it, everyone talked about New York and for a lot of people. Obviously, Boston is that. It's so hard fought for Boston, right? I think that Boston is that pride, the history. It's the one that's the hardest to get into, the heritage. I feel like that's almost separate from the others in its kind of being special. But the big contender, everyone would talk to me is like, oh, New York. And I don't know whether that built it up too much, but I do think the weather had a lot to play with it. But I'm so excited to do that episode with you and for people to hear because there is going to be so many anecdotes.
And there's going to be a lot of controversy, and I can see you getting a lot of response on that. Let's leave that till that.
We'll leave that there, but no, thank you for sharing your insight there, and enjoy your race. Anyone who's got Berlin coming up, either this year or in the future, enjoy it. It's like we said, fast, efficient, flat. It's all of those things. It's promises. Make your own race, make your own memories. We hope this podcast has turned some of those nerves into excitement and just make some of the logistic things easier for you. Thank you as always for listening and for your time. Yimmy, how can people follow you on social media? I know you're very good at keeping people up to date with your running endeavors and you do so many great things. So yeah, please give them a little bit of...
Just on Instagram, people can follow me. It's open. I'm short fat guy _ runs the majors still. Planning on doing some more epic challenges. Watch this space. I'm just finalizing plans around that for next year's challenge. And then also on the London Marathon Facebook, I have a private Facebook group on there, which is the London Marathon advice and support group, tips, advice and support group. And yeah, people can just answer the questions and join those. I'll send you a link so you can include it in the notes. But yeah, on my Instagram page, people welcome to follow me. All my training is on there at the moment for the Amsterdam Marathon. I'm not doing Berlin this year.
Right? Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
That's a week after Chicago. I'm not doing Chicago either. I'm getting FOMO about that one as well. But I'll be doing Amsterdam because it's a flat course, and then I'll take a bit of a break and then start training for London next year.
Yeah, and watch this space. But yeah, definitely give Yimmy a follow. He has got Amsterdam coming up. I haven't done that, so I'd be interested to know your thoughts. And he's very good on the socials. Very entertaining, very informative, some great photography as well. I always look forward to that. And then, if you're ever planning to do London Marathon or got that coming up, literally when I say that Yimmy leaves no stone unturned, join the group and you'll know what I mean. He's got a resource for everything. And then in terms of me and my coaching, I'm an online fitness and wellness coach. And I believe that even though fitness can be hard, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simple. And I help create plans that are customized to you and help you move, think, and feel better. It's that simple. We don't need to complicate it.
And you know what, Meg? I listened to your recent episode on sweating the small stuff.
Yes.
And I've got to say, I was listening to it actually on my 18-mile training run on Sunday. And I did think to myself, you know what? I need to make some journal entries to make small commitments for myself. And the one thing I thought, I don't sleep enough. I have bad sleeping habits. So that episode has influenced me to actually then go and do something about it, to set myself some goals. So thank you for that. And I highly recommend, I love your advice and your guidance that you give on your podcast. So honored to be on here again and sharing the love with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, mate. Not only for listening on your run. I thought you'd have enough of me in your ears. You've had enough of me during the runs live. So the fact that when you've not had me with you, you've still chosen to listen to me, I really appreciate it. And for that feedback. So you can listen to the Meg Method podcast. You've already found us if you're listening to this episode. It'll be both on YouTube and all of the major podcast platforms, whatever's your favorite. We'll be splitting up some clips to put on social media. That's at the Meg Method for all my socials. And Short Fat Guy runs the majors for Yimmy. And enjoy Berlin and all of the majors coming up. And we will speak to you soon.